Okay, so I restarted Max because of that issue I had when I was playing around with adding the claymore image into my scene. So what we'll do is go ahead and get started with the whole process. In this particular model session, what I'm going to show will be spline tools again, how to actually add an image to your scene, the simple, fast way at least, how to fix it so it's actually accurate compared to the resolution of the actual image itself and not the 3D object you apply it to. We'll freeze the transforms of that object, and we will also just continue with edit poly tools. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get our planar object. I'm going to use a keyboard entry this time. That way I can just kind of guarantee the size I want and keep it square. Numlock will help. So 150 times 150. Hit create. Boop, boop. And there's our planar object. And this is what will hold our image, our reference image. So I'm going to right click to deactivate the function. Now I'm going to go to the modify panel. I'm going to hit F4 and I'm going to take down the resolution because I don't really need all those polygons. This is a simple large quad and that's all I need. Alright, we'll go to the image tab and that's going to be right there. Nope, sorry, downloads. There's our claymore. There's our claymore. It's an easy thing to do. Like I said in the last video, don't drag it to the image. Don't drag it to the background. Drag it onto the shaded view of your object. You'll have the same problem as dragging to the viewport if you go in here and try to drag and drop into the wireframe. You need to be in shaded view. So let's drag and drop right there. Minimize this. And so what we need to do is I want to make sure that the resolution is accurate to the image. I want to make sure the display is accurate to the actual image resolution. So what I'm going to do is add a UV map modifier. And I'm just going to do a bitmap fit. So it fits just fine. Now what I want to do is I want to freeze it, but I want to also rotate it so it's useful for me. Right now it's not useful. So let's go into my top view, hit F3. I'm going to rotate this. Hit A to get the angle snap right there. That means I'll rotate in 5-degree increments. Rotate it that way. That is fantastic. And we could actually rotate the actual UV map. We go to the sub object, to gizmo, we could rotate that, but we lose our sword. So let's go ahead and just do that. That works just fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop it below the origin, just a hair, so that the grid is still there and it's above our object. This is going to help me keep things pretty accurate. I can already see that it's just the sword itself is not actually centered on the line, so I'm going to spend some quality time out of angle snap to get this thing a little tighter. It's pretty close actually. It's just a hair off. And that's good enough for me. So what I want to do, oh, maybe not. Let's undo that. Well, it's just off anyway. All right, I'll just deal with it. What I want to do now is basically freeze all the transforms. So right now, if I right click on my object, I can actually go to freeze selection. And if I hit that, now I can't select it and it's frozen, but it's also grayed out and does no good. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to go to the monitor, which is called the display tab. And I'm going to go into here, all the way down here at the very bottom, and it says show frozen in gray. I'm going to uncheck that, and now I'm going to freeze selection. This tab, by the way, is where you can display and hide things and freeze different kinds of objects. You can unfreeze things too, but for the most part, you can also just hit unfreeze all, and that'll work just fine for what we're doing today. All right, first things first, let's attack some basic shapes on this object. It's always good to have an actual image. I'm going to double click on this and use just probably the photos tab, whatever default thing is on here. I'm going to have this set up here, and the reason why is I want to actually get this where I can zoom in on it and have a higher resolution than what 3ds Max is giving me, so I can actually kind of see the shape that's going on with it. So because the max resolution in the engine is pretty bad, all I can really do is block it out, and from there I can actually get into the real details and see kind of try to see if I can figure out how to build these cuts, figure out the handle material and things of that nature. But that's for another setup. Right now what we're going to do is just use our box object and kind of get ourselves set up with building this thing. Let's go ahead and do the same basic setup as I did last time. There is a taper to this to our um, to the blade, so we'll actually use. We can do a taper object. We can also do another tool called a freeform deformation box, which is like basically a freeform transform tool, like you see in Photoshop. Now let's go ahead and get this thing set up. See, I'm building this from the top view here, and that's kind of frustrating. But we're gonna have to reorient our pivot, which is a good thing for you to learn. Let's go ahead and square off our object. So it's 5 by 5, and the reason why I want to square the object off is I want to actually rotate it and then flatten it out. So let's go ahead in here to this is our hierarchy panel. We can affect our pivot, and we're going to be doing this a lot. Let's just go ahead and show you that real quick. So the display, affect pivot, and that just moves the pivot of the actual object to the center of the object versus the bottom of the object, and that allows me to rotate this to 45 degrees that I want. Let's get angle snap back on. And there's our diamond shape, which we'll be able to scale down just like we did the Gladius. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add some segments so that we can actually get the pointy bit. So let's go ahead and do some heights. I think it's going to be width. Nope. We're going to do, there we go. I've added some segments. Now, that's going to be kind of interesting to control. Let's go ahead and turn this to where it's blue so you can see the wireframe as well. It's going to be hard to control, but you can see what's going on here. But I will move verts around with the edit poly, and the tapering will be challenging if I do it by hand, so I'm going to let the software do it by using modifiers. That'll be a lot faster. Quickly, we'll go into our cylinder. So I'm going to go actually off the center of our blade. I'm going to move it down so it sits on the origin a little more effectively. And then we'll add a cylinder. I'm going to use this view so I can line it up to the center of our blade. It's going to be a little bit bigger than the tang, which most swords have. Since we're not really building the tang itself, it's not going to be too big of a deal. So let's go ahead and do something real quick. I want to use the pivot point as the base of the object. So I'm going to move this to the bottom of my sword here and get the radius to match. Radius, not height. We will do the height as well. Do height. Now there's a different material breakup right here between the metal guard over here and the pommel, and then the leather covered handle. And there's an actual cylinder size that's kind of broken up. So I'm going to build another cylinder, and actually I'm not going to build another cylinder, I don't think. I think I'm going to keep it the same and just edit poly it. But let's go ahead and just kind of plan it out anyway, and go for the actual full height. Alright, and then I can go ahead and get ready for the sphere. Again, I'm going to build it in this view so that we get it lined up with the cylinder, and also so that the top of the sphere is oriented to the same direction as the actual cylinder. Go over here, and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees, I mean, because I want the pivot point facing the right direction. Actually, I didn't need to do that at all. That's okay. Radius, match that. Cool. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to line everything up to where they all line up on the y-axis together. So let's go ahead and deselect. Let's go ahead and select this thing. We'll select the handle, and then we'll align it to the blade. We don't need it on the X, and we don't need it on the Z. Cancel. Try again. So let's take a look and see what's happening. So line up to there. Center. There we go. We don't need it on the Y, just need it on the Z and the X. Hit OK. Alright. So now what we'll do is we'll line the sphere up to the handle. And it'll keep the same settings we had last time. Alright, so the next thing will be the actual guard itself. And since I know I can build a symmetrical object using the software and the tools that they give me, it's not going to be that difficult to actually build up. So let's go ahead and kind of plan that out. Again, I'm going to kind of take the same idea that I got here with this shape for the blade. I'm going to duplicate it by holding, I'm going to hold shift and move. So I'm holding shift and just chunking it into that object, hit copy. I'm not too worried about the actual numerical parameters at this point. I just want to get that same shape. I'm going to reduce the segments because it's going to be a sharper taper. Slide that into position. Now let me show you something that we were going to talk about. I was going to show you an instance. This is a very difficult angle to work with. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold shift and then hold shift, not caps lock, hold shift. And I'm going to hit instance. And we talked about this briefly in class during the discussion, but the instance is going to allow me to do object. I can deform this one and this one at the same time. What this is going to allow me to do is going to allow me to actually place this in the angle that I want. I'm going to hit F3 so I can really see what's going on. Oops, that's not going to work. So I need to see the actual image, but not the actual geometry that I'm working on. What I can do here is I hit Alt-X. Alt-X will make it see-through. So now I can rotate it. I'm going to get it out of angle snap and just get the angle just right. So there we go. Now what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and, whoopsie, see, go in here. I'm going to go into this tool set. I'm going to add, right click, show buttons. I'm going to add and edit poly modifier. Now that has the same edit poly modifier. Notice that it's bold face in the stack. This is not. This is normal text and this is bold. The bold means that there's an instance in your actual scene. This object and this object are married and they're related to each other, and that's what the bold is telling me. So I go here, and what I can do at this point is I can grab these verts here. Actually, I can grab either side, but let's go ahead and looks like this object. I'm going to change the size. Slide that down so you can see how it affects both objects. Now I can scale this. Hit one, get out of there, hit there. I'm going to hit one, go to the modify panel, which is the vertex. I can scale that cleanly. The reason why I'm doing this object versus the other object, if I go here, get back out here, and I'm going to undo that real quick. Go and click on this object, and hit one of my, go to my vertices. Select those vertices. See how this is very difficult? That angle is based on the viewport and not on the actual object. So if I actually were trying to move vertices directly, it's kind of tricky. Whereas I go to this object over here, I move that vertex, I can move it on the x-axis because it's oriented to the actual world. So it's 90 degrees, is very accurate and very easy to work with. All right. From there, I can actually add this next one over here and kind of get these guys in the right place. Probably want to go ahead and scale these down. Sweet, we're getting really good there. All right, so the next thing I want to do is move this up. I'm going to move it in the Y to match up to where this blade is, and then I'm going to scale it to match the actual shape. Now the question is, how do we intersect these both? Actually, you know what? I'm going to undo that because I think I'm going to keep that and move the blade around. So let's do that. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the mirror tool. So I have this object selected here. And if I use the mirror tool right here, it's going to mirror based on the actual pivot point. And it's not mirroring, it's only mirroring the actual object. But I can use it to make a copy or an instance. Let's go ahead and make it an instance so that if I can affect one, it'll affect all three, and it'll be faster for actually editing my object. All right, the next thing will be this little crown of cylinders, which should be real easy. I'm going to go to the top view again. And just build some basic cylinders. Oh, that's height. That's why. Oh, cylinders. Sorry. I don't want cylinders. I want tubes. Tubes, man. The internet's full of tubes. All right, so let's get first initial radius, second radius, and then the height. And I'll move it into place. And I know it's way too big, but Max has this finicky way of actually saying you can only build such a size to start off with. But we can scale it to fit as we need to. So I go to Modify panel, drop that segment down, and drop the height down. These are not that big. And I'll just scale the whole thing to where it matches. Again, I'm going to do an instance. So I'm going to hold shift and place that one, make an instance, select those two. I'm going to go to rotate, hold shift, and rotate 90 degrees. So angle snap. All right, hit OK. That's an instance. Now again, since I made an instance, what I'm going to do is add an edit poly modifier, go to the element here, and I can select that object, sub-object, and I can scale these to where they fit perfectly. Now, the hang up with an instance is that I can't attach an object. So if I go here, I can attach other objects. I can't attach itself. So if I go to attach, I can select this guy and this guy. You can tell why it's highlighted. But I can't select these guys. That's because they're instance. You're attaching itself to itself, and that's not going to work. So what we need to do to get that attachment working for us is that we need to make the object unique and watch it go from boldface to regular type, and now I can attach these cylinders. I'm going to move, hit shift, and slide that over. Hit OK, make it an instance. Get it in place. So it's got a little alignment, so it's a little off still. That's okay. We'll rotate it. I should have mirrored it, I guess. That's okay. Either one works. And so there's our basic layout of our object. If we want to actually get our blade tip done, we'll add an edit poly, collapse. Alright, we'll slide these guys up so they match the actual point up here. Now we need to add that taper, so I'm going to hit Alt-X again to get into see-through view. The taper is going to be in the parametric modifiers, like the first day we played around with this stuff. Just do the amount and see where it's going. So it's going on the Z-axis. We want to go on, I think, the Y. There we go. You see it's tapering down here because it's tapering off the middle of the actual pivot. It's tapering off the pivot point. So there's two things we can do. I'm going to undo that real quick so we go to 0. And we can move the center, which is the second modifier, second sub-object of this modifier, which means it's 2 on the top row of our keyboard. So 1 will go to gizmo, 1 will close it, 2 will go to center, 2 again will close it, and that's what we want. So now it's going to taper off the center, which is down here, and we can go back into the taper and reduce it. And so you can see we get a cleaner taper on our object. And go there, hit Alt-X again to get back out of see-through, hold Alt-X, hold Alt-X, and that will conclude our initial video. This is the beginning of our claymore, so let's go ahead and hit it to a save as. Type in claymore _00, hit save, and then next video will be edit poly.